Have you ever noticed that the more honest you are with your family, the less peace you actually have? You start off wanting to be open, to stay close, but somehow the more you share, the less freedom you feel. It's something many of us learn the hard way after 75. Not because our families don't love us, it's because love always comes bundled with expectations, opinions, and emotions that aren't yours to carry. I'm 90 years old. My name is Catherine, and I used to tell my family everything. I thought honesty was the strongest thread holding us together. But after 75, I realized some truths cost more than silence ever would. So I want to talk with you today, not lecture, just talk, about 5 things I've learned should never be shared with your family. Not to be secretive, but to be wise. If you've ever said something honest and instantly wished you could take it back, this one's for you. Have you ever regretted being too honest with your family? Type 1 if yes, 0 if no. Now let's talk about something that quietly changes everything: your money. Not earning it, not saving it, talking about it. Because after 75, the moment you open that financial curtain to your family, something shifts, and it rarely shifts in your favor. Let me tell you about someone I know. Her name was Ruth. She was 82 when her husband passed. Good woman, sharp mind, managed her own bills for decades. After the funeral, her daughter sat her down and said, "Mom, we should go over everything together, just so I know where things stand." Ruth thought that sounded reasonable, loving even. So she opened the books, showed her the savings, the pension, the small investment account her husband had left behind. Nothing extravagant, just enough to live comfortably. But here's what happened next. Within a month, her daughter started asking questions. "Do you really need that gardening service? Why are you still paying for 2 streaming subscriptions? Mom, maybe we should look at selling the house. It's too much for one person." Ruth didn't ask for any of this. She just shared a few numbers over coffee, but those numbers turned her daughter into a financial advisor she never hired. The worst part came 6 months later. Ruth wanted to buy a new recliner. Nothing fancy, just something better for her back. Her daughter called and said, "Mom, I looked it up. That's $800. Don't you think that's a lot right now?" Ruth told me later, sitting in my kitchen, voice low. "Catherine, it's my money, but somehow I felt like I needed permission to spend it." That's what happens. You think you're being transparent. You think you're building trust. But what you're really doing is handing someone a lens they'll never put down. Every purchase becomes a question. Every choice becomes a discussion. And slowly, without anyone meaning harm, you start living your life on someone else's terms. Now I want to be clear. I'm not saying don't plan. Have a will. Have a power of attorney. Have those legal documents in order. That's not optional. That's responsible. But there's a canyon between having a plan and giving your family a line-by-line tour of your bank account. One protects you. The other puts you under a microscope. I've seen it too many times. A mother shares her savings, and suddenly her children start calculating. Not out of greed. Most of them genuinely care. But care and control, they wear the same clothes. And once someone knows your numbers, they can't unknow them. Every holiday gift, every donation, every little luxury, it all gets measured against what they think you can afford. Your money is not a family conversation. It's a personal boundary. And drawing that boundary doesn't make you secretive. It makes you sovereign. You earned it. You saved it. You get to spend it however you see fit, without a committee, without approval, without guilt. Ruth eventually stopped sharing her statements. It took her a while, and it felt uncomfortable at first. But she told me something I'll never forget. She said, "The day I closed that book was the day I started breathing again. Privacy about money isn't secrecy, it's sovereignty. Now let's talk about something quieter than money, but often heavier, your body. Specifically, how you talk about it. Because after 75, every small ache you mention out loud has a way of becoming someone else's emergency. Let me tell you about someone I know. Her name was Dorothy. She was 78, lived alone, still drove herself to church every Sunday. One evening over the phone, she mentioned to her son that she'd felt a little dizzy when she stood up too fast that morning. That's all she said, just a passing comment, the kind you'd make to a friend without thinking twice. But her son didn't hear small talk. He heard danger. Within 2 weeks, he was calling her every single day, not to chat, to check. Did you eat breakfast? Did you take your medication? Did you feel dizzy again? Then came the camera. A little white device in her hallway so he could keep an eye on things. Then came the suggestion, gentle at first, then firmer, that maybe she should have someone come in a few days a week. Just to help out, Dorothy told me, sitting on her porch with her hands wrapped around a coffee mug. "Catherine, I mentioned a headache. They heard a funeral." And she wasn't angry. That's the thing. She knew her son loved her. She knew he meant well. But meaning well and doing well, those are two different things, because what he was really doing, without realizing it, was shrinking her world. Every time he checked in, he was quietly saying, "I don't trust you to handle this." And after a while, she started believing it. That's the trap. You share a small discomfort because you're used to talking about your day. But to your children, your body isn't small talk. It's a ticking clock. They hear dizzy and they think fall. They hear tired and they think decline. And once that lens is on, it doesn't come off. You stop being their mother. You become their patient. I'm not saying hide a serious diagnosis. If something is truly wrong, a new symptom, a real concern, something that needs attention, of course you tell someone. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the everyday noise, the stiff knee in the morning, the back that aches when it rains, the fact that you slept poorly last night. Those things are normal. They're part of living in a body that's been working for 75 years or more. But the moment you say them out loud to your family, they stop being normal. They become evidence. Evidence that you can't manage. Evidence that you need help. Evidence that maybe, just maybe, it's time for the conversation. The one about assisted living, about moving closer, about giving up your keys. So I've learned to be selective. I tell my doctor everything. I tell my family what matters. And the rest, the creaks, the aches, the mornings where I move a little slower, those belong to me. They're mine to carry, mine to manage, and mine to keep quiet about. Silence about small aches isn't denial, it's dignity. Have you ever mentioned something small about your health and watched your family overreact? Type 1 if yes, 0 if no. Now, let's talk about something that has broken more family bonds than money and health combined. Getting involved when your children argue, because after 75, your words don't land the way they used to. They land harder, and they echo longer. Let me tell you about someone I know. Her name was Helen. She was 80, a beautiful woman with a voice that could calm a room. She had 2 children, a daughter named Sarah and a daughter-in-law named Kim. They were both good people, but that Christmas they couldn't agree on anything, where to hold dinner, what to cook, who was bringing what. It was petty, the way most family arguments are, but it was building. Helen thought she could fix it. She'd done it 100 times before when the kids were young. So she called Sarah and said, Maybe we should do Christmas at your place this year. You have more room. That's all. One sentence, practical, logical, harmless, or so she thought. But Kim didn't hear logic. Kim heard favoritism. She always picked Sarah's side. That one sentence, 8 words, became the story of the next 2 years. Kim pulled back, stopped coming to Sunday lunches, stopped calling on birthdays, and Helen sat there wondering how a simple suggestion turned into a war she never enlisted in. Here's what I've learned. When your children are in conflict, they're not looking for a judge. They're looking for an audience. And the moment you offer an opinion, even a gentle one, even a smart one, you stop being the neutral ground. You become the battlefield. Your words get twisted, repeated out of context, and pinned to a side you never chose. It's tempting, I know. Every part of you wants to step in because you raise these people. You know their hearts. You know who's being unreasonable. But knowing and saying are two very different things. Because what feels like helpful advice to us sounds like choosing sides to them. And once you've been labeled, Mom always takes his side, Grandma thinks I'm the problem. That label sticks for years. The hardest thing I ever learned was to say 6 words and stop. You'll work it out. I trust you. That's it. No elaboration, no suggestion, no hidden opinion dressed up as concern. Just confidence in them and silence from me. Because here's the truth nobody tells you. At this age, your silence is more powerful than your wisdom. When you stay quiet, you stay whole. You remain the one person everyone can come to without fear of judgment. The calm eye of the storm. But the moment you speak, even with love, even with good intentions, you become part of the storm itself. I've watched women my age lose relationships with their grandchildren because of one sentence they said during an argument that wasn't theirs. One sentence. That's all it takes when emotions are raw and people are looking for someone to blame. So I keep my opinions where they belong, inside my own head. Not because I don't have them, but because the cost of sharing them is too high. Wisdom at this age isn't knowing what to say, it's knowing when not to. Now, let's talk about something even more delicate, the things you wish you'd done differently, your regrets, because at this stage, we've all got them. The roads not taken, the words unsaid, the years that slipped by while we were busy being responsible. But sharing those regrets with your family, that's where things get dangerous. Let me tell you about someone I know. Her name was Virginia. She was 84, a retired school teacher, gentlewoman, loved watercolors. One quiet evening, she was sitting with her daughter Linda, looking through old photos. And out of nowhere, Virginia said, "Sometimes I wonder what my life would have been like if I hadn't given up painting when you kids were small." She wasn't complaining. She wasn't blaming anyone. She was just thinking out loud the way you do when you're 84 and the evening is soft and the photos are old. But Linda didn't hear nostalgia. Linda heard accusation. She went quiet for the rest of the night. A week later, she called Virginia back. Her voice was shaking. "Mom, are you saying we ruined your life?" Virginia was stunned. She tried to explain, "No, sweetheart, that's not what I meant at all." But the damage was already done, because once someone hears that they might be the reason you're unhappy, they can't unhear it. It sits in them like a stone, and every future conversation gets filtered through that one moment. It took Virginia months to repair what one sentence broke, and even then she told me, "I don't think Linda ever fully believed me. I think part of her still carries it." That's the thing about regrets. To us, they feel like reflections, like wisdom, like the natural inventory you take when you've lived long enough to look back. But to your family, especially your children, your regrets sound like verdicts. They hear themselves in every what if. They search for their names between the lines, and what you meant as a quiet thought becomes a wound they carry for years. I've learned to reframe. Instead of saying, I wish I had traveled more, I say, I'm so glad I got to build a home. Instead of, I wonder what would have happened if I'd kept working, I say, I learned more from the life I chose than any career could have taught me. Same truth, same feeling underneath, but the words land differently because they protect both of us. You see, your children don't need to know every shadow in your heart. They need to know you're at peace. They need to see that the life you lived, the one that included them, was enough, not because it was perfect, but because you chose to see it that way. And if there are regrets that sit heavy, the kind that keep you up at 3 in the morning, write them down. Talk to a friend. Talk to someone who isn't carrying your last name, because some reflections need air, but they don't need an audience that will bleed from them. Some reflections are better kept close to the heart, not because they're shameful, because they're sacred. Now, let's talk about the last thing, and maybe the most explosive one, your will, your inheritance plan. Who gets what? Because I've watched more families fall apart over this than over anything else I've mentioned today, and it always starts the same way, with someone trying to be fair. Let me tell you about someone I know. Her name was Eleanor. She was 79, 4 children, a house, some savings, a small collection of antique books her late husband had treasured. Eleanor was a planner. She hated the idea of leaving confusion behind, so she decided to do something she thought was generous. She sat the whole family down one Sunday and laid it all out. Who gets the house? Who gets the savings? Who gets the books? Everything clear as glass. She expected relief, maybe even gratitude. What she got were questions. Her oldest son called the next morning. Why does Karen get the house? I'm the one who visits you every week. Her youngest daughter called in tears. Mom, do you love me less? Is that what this means? By Wednesday, 2 of her children weren't speaking to each other. By the end of the month, every holiday became tense, every phone call carried an edge, and Eleanor told me something that still sits with me. She said, Catherine, I turned my family into accountants waiting for me to die. That's what happens when you give people a preview of your will, like it's a book chapter they can read early. They don't see fairness, they see rankings. They don't hear your reasoning, they hear your preferences. And from that moment on, every decision you make gets weighed against what they think they're owed. You buy something expensive. They wonder if their share just got smaller. You give a gift to one grandchild. The other's parents start keeping score. The cruelest part is that Eleanor meant well. She genuinely thought transparency would prevent conflict, but all it did was move the conflict forward from after her death to during her life. And now she had to live inside the tension she was trying to prevent. Here's what I believe. Have a will. Absolutely. Have it done properly, with a lawyer, with witnesses, with everything legal and clear. That's not optional. That's love in its most responsible form. But the details, who gets what, how much, which items go where, those belong in an envelope in your attorney's office, not on your dining room table, not in a family meeting, not in a phone call after Thanksgiving dinner. Because once they know, they can't unknow, and once they start comparing, they can't stop. It's not greed. It's human nature. Even the most loving family will feel the pull of comparison when numbers are laid bare. And you, the person who should be living freely, spending joyfully, giving generously, You become trapped by the expectations your own transparency created. Let your will speak after you're gone. While you're here, let your presence speak louder. True peace isn't about how much you give away. It's about how freely you live while you're still here. So here we are. 5 things. 5 lessons I wish someone had told me before I turned 75. Not because I was foolish, not because my family is cruel, but because I loved them so much that I thought sharing everything was the way to stay close. And it took me years to understand that closeness doesn't require complete transparency. Sometimes it requires the opposite, a gentle distance, a chosen silence, a boundary that says, I love you enough to protect both of us from this. I'm not telling you to shut your family out. Please hear me on that. I'm not saying build walls, keep secrets, or pretend everything is fine when it's not. What I'm saying is simpler than that. I'm saying, not everything that is true needs to be spoken. Not everything that weighs on your heart needs to be placed on someone else's shoulders. Some truths are yours to carry, and carrying them isn't weakness, it's grace. I think about Ruth, who got her freedom back the day she closed her bank statements. I think about Dorothy, who learned that her body was her own business. I think about Helen, who finally understood that silence in the middle of a storm is the bravest thing you can do. I think about Virginia, who found a way to hold her regrets without letting them wound her daughter. And I think about Eleanor, who taught me that fairness doesn't always look the way we imagine. Each of them learned the same lesson I did, that privacy isn't the opposite of love. It's the guardian of it. You know, there's a morning I have almost every day that I wouldn't trade for anything. I wake up early, before the phone rings, before anyone needs anything. I make my tea. I sit by the window, and in that silence, nobody's asking what I spent yesterday. Nobody's checking if my knees hurt. Nobody's wondering which grandchild got the better birthday gift. It's just me, my cup, and a sky that doesn't need an explanation. That's what peace feels like at 90. It's not loud. It's not dramatic. It's the quiet knowledge that you are still the author of your own life. That your thoughts, your money, your health, your regrets, your plans, they belong to you. And sharing them is a choice, not an obligation. I've earned that peace, and so have you. If you're sitting here right now thinking about something you shared that you wish you hadn't, give yourself grace. We all did it. We all learned late. But the beautiful thing about being alive at this age is that it's never too late to draw a new line, to say, from today, I choose what I share. That's not selfish. That's wisdom. That's freedom. That's love in its quietest, most powerful form. I'm 90. I'm still learning, still protecting my peace. And if you want to sit with me again, I'll be here. Thank you for spending this time with me. If this meant something to you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And if you haven't already, stay with me. There's always more to talk about. Before you go, tell me, is there something you wish you'd never told your family? Type 1 if yes, 0 if no. I'll be reading every single one.